Sometimes someone else's story can change yours. Subscribe to never miss a single frank, honest, and truly powerful story about love and pain. Make some tea and enjoy my captivating story. Let's go. The damp, piercing breath of a crisp night enveloped the platform in Cobrin. We had just said goodbye to my parents and their extended family. My father's anniversary was celebrated in classic style. Mountains of dreniki and kolduni, sweet potato pancakes, endless toasts over homemade moonshine, which I naturally didn't drink, and karaoke from Drasvet. My smart Dasha stayed overnight with her son at her grandmother's. The little one was tired, and I wasn't opposed to giving them the opportunity to spend more time together. Andrei and I had to get back to Minsk. We both had to be at work by 9. We got tickets for the latest commuter train, which people called the ghost train. He drove almost non-stop, taking a shortcut to the capital's depot. Andrei, my son-in-law, a practical and seemingly unperturbed man, spent a long time checking something on the Belarusian Chikung app. Last chance, Alla Viktorovna is going to the depot. It'll be faster, he said, pocketing his Samsung. His habit of calling me by my first name and patronymic in front of strangers always amused me and slightly irritated me. We're almost the same age, after all. Well, only 12 years apart. I nodded, adjusting the scarf around my neck. I was wearing a formal yet delicate sheath dress of dark blue corduroy. The material itself was thick enough, yet soft, and it clung pleasantly to my figure, hiding what needed to be hidden and emphasizing what I could still show. The décolletage featured a small but deep V-shaped cutout, concealed only by a thin strand of check beads, creating an illusion of strict coverage that was easily disturbed. On her feet were classic black pumps with a low, stable glass heel, comfortable for all-day walking but still creating a seductive arch to the arch of her foot. The only detail that completed the look was a wide leather belt, which I cinched tightly around Natalia, accentuating her figure, even though she wore a thin corset bodysuit underneath, subtly shaping her silhouette. It was my secret little fetish to feel the way fabric and leather compress my body, forcing me to maintain my posture and feel composed, strong, yet at the same time incredibly vulnerable. When the commuter train arrived, she resembled a living ghost. The sparse lights in the windows, the half-empty carriages filled with the smell of damp metal and old plastic. Most of the lamps were out, and the train greeted us in a semi-darkness that seemed thick and velvety. Andrei helped me lug my huge plaid bag, filled with gifts from my mother, our classic shuttle luggage. He sat me down by the windows and settled down next to me, elbow to elbow. I took off my coat, the color of wet asphalt, and carefully folded it across my lap. My legs were buzzing and my shoulders were stiff from the strain. Andrei looked no better. He unbuttoned the top buttons of his dark shirt, revealing his strong neck, and ran a hand over his face, brushing away the fatigue. Night, Minsk, and we are like partisans in hiding. Suddenly his voice rang out, and that familiar boyish note flickered in it. Andrei always jokes like that when he's nervous or awkward. I smiled, shaking my head. You're like a child, Andrei. I wish I could take a deep breath and fall asleep like a grown-up. He chuckled but said nothing, leaning back in his seat, and I suddenly felt this strange, subtle tension, like a string stretched to its limit. Maybe it was fatigue, maybe it was the dim light of the car, or maybe it was how close he sat, his thigh pressed against mine even through the corduroy of my dress. The commuter train, a weathered old woman, jerked, preparing to pull away. I leaned over to adjust my bag at my feet. It tilted dangerously, and jars of cranberry jam began spilling out. I hesitated, half rising, trying to pack them back in, when the train jerked forward so sharply that I was thrown forward. Andrei, trying to help, lost his balance, and fell straight toward me. His hand suddenly pressed against the back of my seat, either side of my head, and his chest almost pressed against my back, pinning me to the velvet upholstery. It was only a second before he pulled away, but I managed to feel the weight of his body, his strong muscles, and the heat penetrating the thin fabric of my blouse through the corset. The scent of his cologne mingled with the light, animal scent of male sweat after a long day. Well, almost like an adult, he breathed. As he returned to his seat, his voice took on a playful tone again, but now with a different, subtle note that gave off a dangerous ring. I laughed brightly, genuinely surprised at how easily it had come. "It really is more fun this way," I said, turning to him. Our gazes met in the semi-darkness. His eyes seemed as dark as the November sky over Polisi. He didn't look away immediately, lingering for a second longer than was strictly necessary. Then the corner of his mouth curled into a barely perceptible predatory smile, and he turned to the window. Darkness floated beyond the glass, occasionally broken by the pale lights of the stations as the commuter train sped past without stopping. The train picked up speed, swaying rhythmically. Inside the car, silence reigned, broken only by the hum of the wheels. We sat in silence. Andre's shoulder barely touched mine. This weightless touch was felt by every cell of my skin, as if the corduroy and cotton fabric had ceased to be a barrier. "Dasha, I'm sure, is already asleep," Andre said quietly. "Yeah, it's good you stayed." "Grandma's happy," I agreed. Silence again, but this time it was thick, dense, like a heavy, insoluble cloud. The car swayed from side to side, and this movement was relaxing, blurring boundaries. Andre leaned his head back and closed his eyes. I glanced at him furtively. His profile was clear, with a light stubble on his chin that hadn't yet had time to grow, lending a brutal look to his face. His lips were slightly parted, and on his strong neck, where the veins showed through, a chin curled. It was a detail I always couldn't help but notice in men. He was so close that I could feel the warmth radiating from him. I quickly turned away, feeling my cheeks begin to burn. "What?" he asked without opening his eyes, and I realized he'd sensed my gaze. "Nothing. Are you lying?" "I'm not lying. I was just thinking about what? About Dasha being lucky. You're a good person." Andre chuckled, but I noticed a muscle twitch in my cheekbone. "I'm not that good after all. I'm sitting on the commuter train with my mother-in-law, and I'm thinking about very bad things," he said, maintaining absolute calm. My heart sank and sank. I turned to him, but he had already closed his eyes again, and there was nothing on his face except a tired half-smile. "Andre," I began, not knowing what to say next, not knowing how to react. "Well, I'm thinking, for example, how nice it would be if you were wearing a different dress right now. Those are the kind of bad thoughts." He opened one eye and looked at me with undisguised defiance, then laughed, but the laugh was strained. I exhaled. Of course, just the fatigue and stress of a long day. The commuter train slowed to a stop at a small snow-covered station. Only one person entered the carriage, an elderly conductor in uniform who, judging by her appearance, was already dreaming of Minsk. She sank tiredly onto a seat at the other end of the carriage. The doors closed, and we set off again. "How much longer?" I muttered. "About an hour and a half. You can take a nap. And you? I'll sit up. I don't feel sleepy." But after a few minutes, his breathing became even, deep, asleep. His head slowly tilted to the side and landed on my shoulder. Heavy, warm. I froze, not knowing what to do. Push him, wake him. He was tired, and frankly, it wasn't unpleasant. Strange, damn strange, but not unpleasant. His hair tickled my cheek, smelled of something fresh, tart, masculine. I sat motionless, afraid to move, and stared out the black window. My thoughts were jumbled. It was just the road, just fatigue, just an accident. Son-in-law, daughter's husband, a good guy. I'm a grown woman, a mother, soon to be a grandmother. I'm not a girl to be dizzy from such a simple, accidental touch, but my heart was beating faster than usual, and the skin on my shoulder, where his head lay, burned like fire. The train rocked especially hard as it passed a certain section of the track. Andre muttered something in his sleep, turning even closer to me. His hand slipped off the armrest and fell on my thigh. It just fell by accident. In a dream, I looked at that hand, at the long, strong fingers, at the wrist where a tan line peeked out under the cuff. Should I take it away or leave it? I left it. I just left it and continued to look out the window, feeling every point of contact, my shoulder, my thigh, the warmth of his breath on my neck. The train hummed, the lights flickered out outside and we rode through the Belarusian night. Two tired people. People were too close, too quiet, too alone. Half an hour later, almost everyone had disembarked. Station after station, the conductor went into the next car. The doors closed, opened, and the car emptied. By the time we passed the next stop, our compartment was empty. Just the two of us in the semi-darkness, under the flickering lights, in the rhythmic hum of the wheels. Andrei woke up 5 minutes later, lifted his head from my shoulder, and smiled guiltily. "Probachtse alla Viktorovna," he muttered, unable to resist, and pulled away. His hand also disappeared from my thigh. I felt a chill where it had just been warm, and the sensation was unexpectedly sharp and unpleasant. He rubbed his face with his palm, shook his head, driving away sleep, looked out the window, then at me. Something new appeared in his gaze, as if sleep had lifted some familiar mask. "Have you ever done anything crazy on a train like this?" he asked quietly, but every word rang out clearly in the empty car. I chuckled, trying to keep my tone light, and at most I moved closer to the exit. Not true. Long ago, in another life, when I was dumber and younger, all sorts of things happened. Night trains, butt kisses, kisses in the vestibules, but that was so long ago that it seemed like someone else's memories, and talking about it now with my son-in-law would be too much. Andrei nodded slowly, as if memorizing my answer or as if he didn't believe it. A barely perceptible smile played at the corners of his lips, then he stood up without explanation, walked to the door, pushed it open, and went into the next car. I was left alone, watching him go. My heart was beating fast for some reason. What was he up to? Where was he going? I sat listening to the rumble of the wheels, the creaking of the car as it turned corners. Finally, the door opened and Andrei returned. He walked slowly, deliberately down the aisle, stopped next to my seat and sat down, but not opposite me, not in his usual place. He sat close to me so that our thighs touched, so that I could feel the heat of his body through the thick corduroy of my dress. I didn't move away. I could have, I should have, but I didn't. "If I said you look too good today," he began, quietly looking not at me, but somewhere ahead into the darkness of the empty car, "you'll think it's from fatigue or from the wine." My throat was dry. I swallowed before answering. My voice was hoarse, a little lower than usual. "I'll think you realize this too late." He turned his head and looked into my eyes, for so long that I felt my skin burn under his gaze. He said nothing, just looked, and his eyes read everything, a question, a challenge, naked desire. Then his hand moved slowly, as if giving me time to stop him. His fingers touched my wrist. He traced a light line across my skin, up to my elbow, then back down. The touch was almost weightless, but I felt every millimeter of the journey. I didn't flinch. The train rocked gently, and there was something soothing, almost hypnotic in the movement. The lights flickered. Darkness flickered outside. His fingers slid back and forth over my arm, slowly, measuredly, then lowered my hand. They traced my palm, lingering on my pulse. He could feel my heart pounding. He must have felt it. We both breathed faster. I heard him, and he heard mine. The silence between us wasn't just silence anymore. It was filled with something dense, tangible. His fingers intertwined with mine. He pressed lightly. I returned the squeeze, not realizing what I was doing, or even understanding it too well. "We shouldn't," I whispered, but my voice sounded unconvincing even to me. "I know," he replied, but he didn't let go of my hand. On the contrary, he pulled her closer, placed her on his knee. Our faces were very close. I saw every eyelash, every wrinkle around his eyes, the shadow of stubble on his cheeks. I smelled his skin, masculine, warm, with a slight bitterness. "Dasha," I started weakly. "He's sleeping in Kobrin." He interrupted. "And he won't recognize me." Wrong. It was all so wrong. But it was the train. It rocked us, and it all happened by accident. Would that excuse work? His free hand lay on my cheek. His thumb traced my cheekbone, the corner of my lips. I closed my eyes. It was a mistake, because without sight, all my other sensations were tenfold intensified by the warmth of my palm, the roughness of my fingertips and his breath on my lips. The train lurched sharply on the switch. We both leaned forward from the inertia. Well, that was it. Greedily, desperately. His arms wrapped around me. They pulled me closer. I was practically in his lap. Our bodies merged. The car rocked. The lights outside the window flickered faster. We picked up speed, approaching Minsk. The commuter train began to slow down. The screech of brakes, the howl of metal. We broke apart. "Depot," he croaked. The train slowly rolled under the arches of a huge hangar. The light grew brighter. Floodlights were burning here. The commuter train crawled along the tracks carefully, almost gently, penetrating the depths of the depot. I was still sitting on his lap, pressed against him, feeling every line of his body, his tense form. It all happened so quickly that I didn't even have time to squeak. One moment, and we were already standing at the end of the line in the bright, cold light of the depot, returning to reality, where we have names, roles, responsibilities, where what had just happened should never have happened. If this commuter train didn't have a depot, he said slowly, looking out the window into the darkness, I'd ride with you all night. The words hung in the air, simple, honest, heartbreaking. I laughed quietly, almost involuntarily, because laughter was the only way to keep from crying. The absurdity of the situation, the hopelessness, and this piercing tenderness that couldn't be kept to myself. He smiled back, sad but warm. He raised my hand to his lips and kissed my knuckles, lingering, as if memorizing the taste of my skin. Then he lowered it and let go. "It's time," he said. "Yes, it's time." We stood. He took my bag, the one with gifts from my mother, and slung it over his shoulder. I buttoned my coat and wrapped my scarf around my neck. Familiar, everyday movements, returning us to roles, mother-in-law and son-in-law, two relatives returning from a trip. The doors hissed open. The cold night air hit our faces, sobering, sharp. We stepped out onto the platform. It was completely empty. No passengers, no security guards, no taxi drivers, only streetlights casting long shadows and the distant hum of Minsk. Andrei walked beside me, slightly ahead, lighting the way with his phone. I wrapped my scarf around myself, hiding my face deeper. We looked like family, close friends, caring for each other, and perhaps we were, but only in those places where no one was watching, in the darkness of the empty depot, on the night train, in those stolen minutes. At the exit, he stopped, took out his phone, and began to call a taxi. I stood next to him, listening to his quiet voice, which had lost all trace of the intonation that had resounded in the car. Now he was simply Andrei, Dasha's son-in-law, her husband. 10 minutes, he said, putting his phone away. "We'll have time to warm up inside the building." We entered the small, empty waiting room. He silently bought 2 cups of coffee from the machine, for me with sugar, for himself without. He remembered how I liked it. We sat on a bench, holding hot cups in our hands, warming our frozen fingers. We were silent. "What should we talk about, Allah?" he began quietly. I stopped him. "No need, really, no need. We're tired. It's been a long drive, that's all." He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. He understood. We both understood. Words would only ruin it. The taxi driver was silent the entire ride. We sat in the back seat, each by his own window, looking out at the Minsk streets rushing past. There was a half-meter and a gulf between us. When we pulled up to my house, Andrei got out and helped me carry out my bag. We stood at the entrance. He looked at me, and I looked at him. I wanted to say something important, something right, but the words failed me. "Dziku and thank you," I finally managed to say for company. "Kalaska is here. You're always welcome," he replied, his voice tinged with sadness. I turned and walked to the door without looking back. Behind me, I heard the taxi door slam, the car pull away, and the sound of the engine fade into the night. I went up to my apartment, undressed, took a shower, and went to bed. I lay there with my eyes open, staring at the ceiling, replaying the trip over and over in my head. The dim light of the train car, his hand on my thigh, his greedy, desperate kiss, the warmth of his lips. My phone vibrated. A message from Dasha. "Mom, you've arrived. Everything's fine." I texted, "Yes, honey. honey, everything's great, sleep." I put the phone down and turned off the light. It was slowly getting light outside. Somewhere out there, at the Minsk depot, our commuter train stood empty, but inside, within its metal walls, in the flickering lights, in the creaking of the seats, our story remained, short, impossible, forbidden, and so alive that I felt it with every cell of my body, and the train pulled away toward the darkness, empty, but now with our story inside. In the morning it would depart again with new passengers, new destinies, and what happened that night would remain only between these walls and between us forever. Morning in Minsk arrived with treacherous clarity, the depot floodlights, the bright lights of the taxi, the familiar streets of the Urrutia district. All of this should have pushed me back into reality, but reality turned out to be contaminated. I lay there until dawn, feeling the non-existent weight of his head on my shoulder and the phantom warmth of his hand on my thigh. Every cell of my body remembered the touch, every nerve hummed with a belated, forbidden discharge. When I finally forced myself to stand, the first thing I did was go to the mirror, a middle-aged woman in her early 40s with eyes in which fatigue mingled with a wild, youthful gleam. The velveteen sheath I'd casually tossed onto the chair felt like evidence, like a shed skin. I picked it up and felt the soft yet dense fabric. It was perfectly formal and perfectly innocent, but in my eyes it had become a uniform for sin. I called work citing a migraine from the journey and spent the whole day in feverish anticipation, worse than any migraine. Dasha's call rang out like a gunshot. "Mommy, how are you?" Dad called, worried. "And the main thing is, you and Andre got here on time. Andre asked to leave work early today. He said, 'I need to go to the store. Come over to our place this evening. We'll sit and discuss Dad's anniversary.' And I'm getting tired of chasing him around." She spoke so easily, so casually, that I wanted to shout at her, "Your husband, my son-in-law last night," but I just bit my lip. "Of course, honey, I'll come," I replied, and my voice sounded surprisingly calm. 7:40 p.m., the first time since the commuter train, the first time we would meet under her roof, our family life. Preparing for this family dinner had become a ritual for me. It wasn't a matter of choosing clothes, it was a matter of self-determination. I decided to wear something that would contrast as much as possible with the relaxed nighttime atmosphere of the train car. I needed to create armor, to show myself and him that I was Alla Viktorovna again, stern, collected, unapproachable. I chose a black pencil skirt made of thick wool that ended exactly at mid-knee, incredibly narrowing my stride, forcing me to take small, controlled steps. Over it, a thin ivory cashmere jumper with a high, almost stand-up collar. Under all this armor, a tightly laced silk corset prevented me from taking a deep breath. This was my new secret fetish, control through restrictions. I wanted every breath, every step, to be the result of effort, for the physical tension to drown out the emotional. But the most important detail was the shoes. They were new, unbroken-in, dark cherry patent leather pumps with a high, thin 15-centimeter heel. They were unimaginably beautiful and unimaginably uncomfortable, forcing my foot into an incredibly elegant and painful arch. I almost never wore heels at home, but today I did so deliberately. Every step across the parquet floor to the tire apartment would be accompanied by a clear, rhythmic thud, which I knew he would hear too, the sound like a challenge, a signal. I arrived on time. Dasha opened the door, beaming and tired. "Mommy, how good you came." I was already seething, and Andre wouldn't leave the kitchen. They were in cahoots with our Sasha. I took off my coat, and the scent of freshly baked pancakes and coffee immediately hit me. Andre emerged from the kitchen, holding their son. He was dressed in simple dark jeans that seemed too tight and a light gray t-shirt that accentuated his broad shoulders. His work, formal facade was off. He was a man in a family setting, and this appearance pierced my armor faster than the corduroy in the train car. Our gazes met, only for a second, but that second was filled with silence and a deafening sound, the click of my heels on the parquet floor. "Alla Viktorovna, good evening," he said, completely evenly, and this formal tone was a perfect lie. His eyes, they didn't smile. In them, I saw the same tension, the same feverishness as in myself. "Good evening, Andre. You seem very fast today. Aren't you tired after our overnight trip?" I emphasized the last word so only he could sense the subtext. On the contrary, the trip was invigorating. Just just what I needed. I'd like some coffee. Maybe I'd like a stronger espresso? With pleasure, I replied, holding back a smile. A stronger espresso? Yes, I was waiting for this. The next hour passed in a painful family farce. We sat at the table discussing Dad's anniversary, sorcerers, moonshine, toasts. But every word was a barrier that only increased the pressure. Every time Andre bent down to help Dasha, or when his hand passed mine, I felt it like an electric shock. I sat perfectly upright, constrained by the corset and stiff jumper, trying not to show how tired my feet were from the incredibly high heels. This pain, this discomfort, this physical confinement was what I needed to keep from breaking down, grabbing his hand, demanding an explanation. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. Dasha, I'll quickly help Andre in the kitchen while you put your son to bed. Dasha was too busy to pay attention. She nodded, pulling her son into bedroom. I stood up. The click of heels, the shoes clicked rhythmically, like a metronome counting down the seconds to an explosion. Andre was already standing by the sink. I thought you weren't coming, he whispered without turning around. I approached him, deliberately slowing my pace, feeling my calves tense like new feet. I told you, I needed an invigorating ride. He turned, and we found ourselves trapped in the tiny kitchen. He was too close, blocked by the sink and refrigerator. He leaned against the countertop. "Why are you wearing this?" he asked, his gaze sliding from my neck, clinging to my waist with a sweater and a tight skirt, and stopping at my cherry-colored shoes. "What exactly? It's like you've armored yourself up with all this. Too strict, too tall." He ran his hand over his jeans, and I noticed his fingers slightly trembling. "On the train, you were soft, pliant." I felt my face heat up. "And here I am, Alla Viktorovna, your wife's mother. I know who you are. I haven't forgotten for a second. Do you think I'm sleeping?" "I don't know. That's your problem." I took a step around him, and that step was limited by the pencil skirt. Without moving, he intercepted my hand, which was lying on the tabletop. He grabbed my wrist, where the thin, vulnerable skin lay beneath the cashmere sleeve. "No, this is our problem now. You think it was easy for me to look at you at the table, at your velvet body clad in wool and leather, when I know how soft you are?" His voice was low, almost animalistic. He pulled my wrist to his lips and kissed my pulse point, gently but demandingly. I gasped. The corset squeezed my lungs. I felt my palms sweat. It was a fetish, driven to the limit of desire in complete captivity. A stiff skirt constricting my hips, heels making every step a feat, and his hand holding me in place. "This is wrong, Andre. I can't. We can't. We can. You just put on the most complex, most beautiful clothes, not for Dasha, not for me, for yourself, to feel this tension, and now you're here, in patent leather shoes, knowing that I feel, that I want you." He let go of my wrist and then, incredibly quickly, grabbed me around the waist. One movement, and he pressed my back against the cold refrigerator door. The temperature difference was shocking. Cold metal and the heat of his body. "I know the place. Wednesday. Next to your office, there's an old abandoned greenhouse in the botanical garden. No one goes there except the gardeners, and in the evenings, no one. At 7, you'll come alone and put on shoes that hurt you to walk in." He leaned over. His breath scorched my neck. I felt the corset cutting into my ribs. Pain and desire mingled. "Why should I do this?" I whispered. "Because you put them on. Because you came. Because you don't want this story to end on the Phantom Express." He pulled away as abruptly as he'd pulled me in, leaving me pressed against the refrigerator, suffocated from lack of air and an excess of emotion. I heard Dasha's footsteps in the doorway. "Okay, Mommy. That's it, Mommy. Sasha's asleep. Let's go have some tea." I took a deep, ragged breath. I straightened my jumper and pulled the Alla Viktorovna mask over my face. Andre was already smiling. "Alla Viktorovna, everything's fine. You look very pale. Yes, it's just a little warm. Tea, Dasha, with pleasure." I left the kitchen, trying to make the click of my heel sound as confident as possible. But beneath that confidence, beneath the wool, cashmere and varnish, I knew that on Wednesday evening at 7:00 p.m. I would be waiting in the abandoned greenhouse, and I would put on those very same patent cherry-colored shoes that would remind me of the pain and the control I was about to lose. The 3 days between Sunday and Wednesday stretched on like rubber. My life became a waiting game. I worked, went to meetings, even went with a friend to the Minsk Cafe on Zybitskaya Street, but all of this was just background noise. The city map, the route to the botanical garden, and the image of Andrei leaning me against the cold wall of the refrigerator constantly replayed in my head. I noticed I had become obsessed with shoes. I went through all my shoes, pumps, and boots, relishing the feel of the tight leather, the stiff sole, and the sharpness of the heel. My former adult indifference to appearance was replaced by a nervous attention to detail. I practiced walking around the apartment in those very same cherry-colored stilettos, feeling them dig into the insteps of my feet. Pain, it grounded me, making the upcoming meeting more acute. Wednesday, work passed in a fog. At 6:30, I left my office in central Minsk. I was wearing a formal two-piece suit, the color of wet asphalt, a fine wool, and a skirt that fit like a glove, and of course those patent leather cherry-red shoes. I ditched tights, opting for the thinnest, almost invisible stockings with silicone elastic. That was another secret of mine, the smooth, silky feel of a stocking under a formal skirt, the knowledge that beneath my clothes I was completely prepared to break the rules. I took a taxi to the central entrance of the botanical garden. The sun was already setting, painting the sky the same cherry and grey tones as my outfit. I asked the driver to drop me off on a side alley out of sight. The air was cool, autumnal, smelling of rotting leaves and damp earth. My high heels sank treacherously into the wet ground. I walked slowly, forced to slowly, keeping to the path. Every step was a challenge, and I savored it, feeling my body protest the discomfort and my mind suppress its protests. Finally, the old greenhouse came into view, a huge glass and metal building, apparently built during Soviet times. Half the glass was cloudy or broken, and inside, the same semi-darkness reigned as in the train car, an abandoned paradise where tropical plants hid under a layer of dust and cracked glass. I opened the rusty side door and entered. It was stuffy and humid inside, like a steam room. It smelled of earth, exotic flowers, and some unusual sweetish rot, a striking contrast to the cold, austere world of Minsk. Andrei was waiting for me. He stood between the giant leaves of the ficus and palm trees, silhouetted against the single dim light burning in the corner. He wasn't wearing jeans or a suit. He was dressed in dark, thick cotton trousers and a khaki turtleneck. The clothes were simple, but they fit him perfectly, accentuating his strong frame and making him look like some kind of explorer or mercenary. In this place, in these clothes, he looked completely out of place, not like a son-in-law, but simply like a man. "I knew you'd come, and I knew you'd wear these," he said. His voice was low and bare in the confined space. "Do you see them?" My voice was slightly hoarse. I could feel the corset constricting my chest under the suit. "I feel like they resonate on you, and you look completely different in them, in cherry varnish." He slowly approached me, and I didn't back down. I couldn't back down. Behind me was a shelf with pots. When he came close, I had to tilt my head back to look him in the eyes. Because of the height of my heels, I was almost on the same level as him. It was a new, foaming sensation of equality of height in a completely unequal position. "Why are you doing this, Andrei?" He didn't answer. Instead, his gaze slowly dropped to my shoes, then he sank to one knee, right onto the damp clay soil of the greenhouses. I froze. It was unexpected, obscene, and incredibly intimate. My heart pounded. He knelt before my outfit, before my pain, before my choice. He carefully, reverently, took my foot in a patent leather shoe in his hand. His fingers were warm and strong. They squeezed you. I heard you. I walked. Every step was a submission to these shoes. "You're punishing yourself." "It's not punishment. It's control. The control you need to be near me." He ran his thumb over the tense arch of my foot, just above the cherry polish. "I want to see your control. Take it off." He didn't try to remove the shoe, didn't do anything vulgar. He simply held my foot, this most vulnerable part of my body, which had suffered all day. This moment, when his strong hand held my foot, covered in the thinnest stocking and patent leather, was far more erotic than any kiss. It was a fetish of respect and power. "Get up," I said, trying to keep my voice from shaking. He rose slowly, not taking his eyes off my foot, which he carefully lowered to the ground. "You came in a suit to work, where everything must be strict, but underneath you are all soft, hot, and you came here not to take off the suit, but this control." He took a step back toward the shelf where the huge spreading ferns stood. In that moment, he became my son-in-law again. Dasha asked why I was so distant. "I can't look at her. All I see is you, kneeling with jam in the semi-darkness of the car. I didn't think this would happen, but now it's the only thing I can think about." I felt a wave of dizziness, the damp, heavy air of the greenhouses, the smell of rotting flowers, the pain in my feet. His words. It was too much. I leaned against the cold metal pole. "Do you want me to do something? Take this suit off me, Andre. Release this control." He smiled, but it wasn't the smile he'd had on the train. It was dark and determined. "No, Allah, you put it on yourself, and you must take it off yourself. This is my condition. If you want to continue, you must show that you are ready to leave Alla Viktorovna here, in this greenhouse." His hands didn't touch me, but he watched as my fingers slowly, almost trembling, reached for the buttons of my jacket. I unbuttoned it. It fell onto the damp ground, smelling of earth and tropical life. I took a deep breath for the first time that evening. The corset had kept me from breathing fully, but now I felt free. Under the jacket was only a thin silk blouse. What next? Next the skirt. But slowly. You must feel liberation from every object you've chosen to control. I hesitated. The pencil skirt was the last defense. Behind it, only stockings remained. If I take it off, I can't. You can't retreat. That's the goal. Do this for me, for yourself. I turned away so I wouldn't have to see his eyes. The damp, stuffy walls of the greenhouse seemed endless. I unzipped my skirt. The thick wool slid off my hips, stopping at my knees. It didn't fall. It remained hanging there, shackles my legs, preventing me from taking a wide step, but at the same time giving my hips freedom. Now I stood in a strict blouse, a tight corset, stockings that started high under my skirt, and patent leather shoes, almost fully dressed, but completely naked before him. "You are beautiful, Allah, but you are still in these shoes. They are a part of me. I can't live without them." He didn't insist. He simply came up, took my hand, and led me through the thicket to the farthest, darkest corner of the greenhouse, where there was an old rusty bench covered in damp moss. We sat down. The skirt hanging around my knees made it awkward, impossible. We sat so close that our knees touched. "We need a place where we can talk, where this won't happen. Glass, and there will be no Dasha, and there will be no fear." He took something small, wrapped in paper, out of his pocket. He unfolded it. It was a key. My friend had left for duty. He has a small apartment on Kalvaryskaya Street. He's leaving tomorrow. He left me the key so I can water the plants. This place is ours from 8 p.m. until morning. He placed the key in my palm. Heavy, cold, real. "Are you sure? We can go back to Minsk to say this didn't happen." I clenched the key in my fist. It was my control, my new forbidden control. "I know what I'll be wearing tomorrow, and it won't be a suit." I stood up slowly. My feet burned, but the pain was pleasant. "I'll go first. See you tomorrow, Andre. See you tomorrow, Allah." He kissed my forehead almost paternally, but his eyes blazed with a fire that promised hell. I walked out of the greenhouse, leaving my jacket behind and my skirt hanging at my knees. My heels clicked on the asphalt. 1, 2, 1, 2. I walked toward my new life, feeling the corset constrict me and the stockings clinging to my thighs. The apartment on Kalvaryskaya Street awaited. Thursday. What should have been a normal day had become the threshold of something impossible. The key to the apartment on Kalvaritskaya Street was in my bag, heavy, cold, tangible. I'd taken the day off, citing the need to take Dasha's grandson after Kobrin. Dasha, unsuspecting, was delighted that I'd lighten her day. While Dasha was at work, I played with my grandson. It was strange to absorb this maternal, familial normality, knowing that in just a few hours I'd find myself with her husband in a strange apartment. I felt like a spy assigned to the most dangerous mission. My choice of clothes for that evening was dictated by emotions I'd tried to suppress in the previous days. No more armor, no more stiff wool, no more uncomfortable heels that screamed control. I wanted to be soft, vulnerable, and revealing. I chose a slip dress of heavy, flowing champagne-colored satin. It wasn't an outfit, more like loungewear worn under a robe. It had thin straps, a deep but discreet neckline, and fabric that glided over my body like water, emphasizing every curve. Underneath, there was nothing but the finest lace ensemble and that same corset that had become my second body. But today, I loosened the laces so I could breathe more deeply. I wanted to feel free and contained at the same time. Instead of shoes, I wore soft velvet ballet flats with thin leather soles. No clatter, just a silent cat-like movement. I wanted only his touch to energize me, not the shoes. I left my grandson with a friend, saying I needed to go to the dentist. At 8 p.m., I was already standing outside the old Minsk building on Kalvaritskaya Street. The weather was slushy, with a light drizzle. I went up to the 4th floor. My heart was pounding against my ribs like a bird trapped in a cage. The apartment was small and empty. The smell of old dust, men's cologne, and a hint of dampness filled the air. I turned on the dim light in the hallway and sat down on the narrow sofa in the living room, waiting. I was completely prepared, and this wait was the most excruciating. He arrived 15 minutes later, wearing civilian clothes and a dripping jacket. He walked in, slammed the door twice, and we were trapped. "I thought you'd change your mind," he said, throwing off his jacket. He was wearing the same dark gray turtleneck and trousers as yesterday. "And I thought you'd bring flowers." I tried to joke, but my voice wavered. Andrei approached, his eyes blazing. He wasn't Dasha's son-in-law. He wasn't Dasha's husband. He was a man seeking an answer to a question we were both afraid to ask. He didn't rush us. He came over, stopped in front of me, and knelt down. It was his gesture, his fetish, his homage to the taboo. No heels today. You made a choice. You came barefoot. Almost. These are ballet flats. He carefully took my foot, clad in a velvet ballet flat, and placed it against his cheek. The velvet was cool. "You're soft, Allah. Too soft. It's dangerous." I felt his breath on my foot. It was incredible that we were starting with such an intimate gesture. It was a sign of a slow, sensual entry into our forbidden world. He stood up and sat down next to me so that only our hips touched. I spent all day today watering flowers that weren't growing, trying to explain to myself why I had a key to this apartment. And I spent all day playing with your son, trying to explain to myself why I'm here now. I turned to him. The satin of my dress rustled. On the train it was unconscious, in the greenhouse on call, and now it's our choice. "Andrei, we can't just kiss." He didn't let me finish. He leaned in, and this time it wasn't greedy and desperate like on the commuter train. It was slow, demanding, and long. His lips were wet and warm. His hand rested on my waist. He pulled me toward him, and I felt the satin of my flesh slide over the fabric of his turtleneck. "You're so smooth," he whispered, pulling away for a second to catch his breath. I could feel the lace dampening beneath the satin. The heat emanating from him was so intense that it felt like we were dissolving in the stuffy air of this small apartment. He began kissing me again, and this time his hands weren't just at my waist. He ran his palms up my ribs and stopped at the laces of my corset. He could feel it. "What is it?" he asked. His voice was barely audible. "Control. I've loosened it, but it's still there. My fetish, keeping myself in check. I want to remove your bridle." He ran his finger along the laces. It was such a simple, indecent touch. He was touching the part of my garment that was designed for secret restraint, and with his touch, he made that restraint desirable. "No, don't take it off. I want it to stay, to feel how much I want you while I'm tied up." He chuckled. "Okay. But I can loosen it even more." His hand slid under the satin. The coolness of his palms against my hot skin was a shock. He ran his fingers along the laces, loosening them slightly. The corset loosened, allowing me to take a deep, full breath. That breath was filled with a sense of defiance. I felt a surge of strength. I went on the offensive. I pulled him forcefully toward me. My hands slid under his turtleneck to touch his bare back, his strong muscles. You talk too much about control, Andre, and I want to feel your power. You will feel it. His hands returned to my body, but now they were more dominant. He lifted me from the couch, and the satin of my dress followed me. I found myself on my feet, and he stood opposite me. For the first time, I felt how close we were. He picked up my ballet flats, slowly, carefully. He removed one, then the other. I was left barefoot on the cold wooden floor, free of shoes, but still bound, he whispered. He ran his hand over my dress. The satin slid. He slowly lifted it until the dress gathered at my waist. I stood before him in his satin top, corset shorts, and stockings, which were now exposed to his gaze, completely exposed with a loose lace band. This is your truth and my truth. I want to feel your skin, not this fabric. He pulled me close, sat in between us. He began kissing my shoulder, my neck, leaving a wet trail across my hot skin. I felt his hand slide over my silk-clad thighs, reaching the elastic of the dangerous border. I closed my eyes. I was ready for him to cross that border. We were in a strange apartment, locked in, separated from the world. We were our true selves, and at that very moment, a sharp, insistent doorbell rang in the silence. 3 short, loud rings. We froze, frozen in an uncomfortable, half-naked position. The satin was collected for Natalia. I'm barefoot. He's standing there, clinging to me. What's this? I exhaled. I don't know. No one knows I'm here. My friend's gone. No one should ring. The bell rang again, longer and louder. Then silence, and then a knock, strong, insistent on the window. Andre pulled away abruptly. His face tightened. All emotion vanished. He became once again the tough, practical man I knew. He nodded at my clothes. Get dressed quickly. Through the kitchen. There's a fire escape. I stood there, unable to move. But who could it be? He didn't answer. He grabbed his jacket and rushed to the window. His face was pale. Allah, I'm not joking. This isn't just a neighbor. This is someone who shouldn't have known this apartment was vacant. Go away. I'll distract him right now. I quickly pulled my clothes down and pulled on my ballet flats. I watched as he rushed toward the door without a word, pretending he'd just woken up. I heard his voice, loud and irritated. Who's there? What do you need? I realized this meeting, this place, this key, all of it wasn't just a love nest. There was some secret here, some danger, something that had nothing to do with our passion, but with his life. I darted into the kitchen and opened the window. Cold, damp air hit me in the face. The fire escape was visible in the darkness below. I didn't have time to leave. At that moment, I heard a scream. No, Andre! A woman's scream, and then a thud, a dull, heavy sound, and silence. I froze by the window, unable to breathe. I stood there in a satin dress, a corset, and soft ballet flats. I was ready for love, but I found myself facing horror. I quietly opened the kitchen door. The light in the hallway was out, and not a sound could be heard. Andre! I whispered. Silence. I took a step. On the floor by the front door, I saw a dark spot and a lonely, familiar man's hand. I didn't dare go closer. Fear gripped me, but I had to know. I turned on the light in the hallway. Andre was lying on the floor. He was unconscious. A woman stood over him, clutching a heavy, shiny key. Nedash, a woman I didn't know, but her eyes, there was a wild, mad look in them. Jealousy. Finally, Alla Viktorovna, you've had a long journey, she said, and I recognized that voice. It was the voice of that same elderly conductor from the Phantom Express. I stood in the middle of a strange corridor, barefoot in a low satin dress, looking at the conductor. In the dim light, her face seemed carved from stone, and her eyes glowed with a fanatical, maddened light. The heavy, shiny brass key she held in her hand turned out to be a weapon, not just a symbol. You've been traveling a long time, Alla Viktorovna, she repeated, and her voice held not a threat, but a tragic statement of fact. I was expecting this. I knew you'd arrive. I knew the Phantom Express doesn't let its passengers go easily. What have you done? My voice was barely audible. I took a step back, and the satin rustled. The conductor, whom I'd only glimpsed briefly in the carriage, and who seemed like a tired elderly woman, now looked like the embodiment of vengeful fate. She wore the same dark blue uniform jacket and skirt, though it was clearly not her shift. I merely ended your journey. Andrei has always been mine. He is my guide on this journey, and he should have stayed strapped to me. But he found a new depot in you, a new terminus. I looked down at Andrei. He lay motionless. His strong arm lay lifeless on the floor. Blood. A dark stain was spreading across the floor next to his head. Are you his? Me? No. I simply returned him to my path. You see, Alla Viktorovna, when you work on the railroad, you begin to believe in symbols and schedules. Your marriage is the main line. My relationship with Andrei is a secret line, always shorter and faster. And you're just a random passenger stuck at the station. You needed to be sent home. She took a step toward me. I smelled the sharp, acrid smell of formalin, mingling with the smell of the train and dampness. Our relationship began in a carriage as empty as yours. He was mine until you arrived with your corduroy dresses and patent leather shoes. You are a schedule breaker. I stood, my arms pressed to my body, feeling the corset dig into my ribs. The pain brought me back to reality. I needed to run, to save myself and to save Andrei. I have a daughter waiting for him, I whispered, trying to appeal to something human. I had a life waiting for him. His daughter, your daughter, is the weak link in his life, and I am his heavy burden, and he had to lead him to the end. He himself showed me where this depot apartment was. He was so afraid that I would come that he himself gave me the key. I understood. His fear wasn't because of Dasha. He was waiting for her. She was his secret, his other more dangerous life, and I was just a catalyst for her madness. She raised her hand. The heavy key gleamed in the hallway light. I saw blood on its handle. It's time for you to get off at the terminal, Alla Viktorovna. Your depot is there. She nodded toward the kitchen. But I couldn't leave. I couldn't leave him. I did the most illogical thing. I rushed toward the bathroom, which was behind the conductor. My brain was working at a frantic speed, and I remembered there was no lock in the kitchen. I yanked the bathroom door open, locked it, the latch. The soft ballet flats made no sound. I looked at myself in the mirror, a half-naked woman with blazing eyes in crumpled satin and a loose corset. At that moment, for the first time in my life, I felt like a hunter, not a hunted. The conductor's scream came from behind the door. She realized I'd locked myself in. Open up. You're stuck on my line. I won't let you go free. I grabbed a large, heavy glass bottle of men's Eau de Cologne from the shelf, the scent of Andrei's Eau de Cologne. You will not be my final destination, I screamed. The conductor began slamming her shoulder against the door. The old Soviet door creaked. I only had a few seconds. I quickly dialed Dasha's number. Dasha, listen to me carefully. This is important. You must immediately call the police to Kalvaryskaya 4, apartment 12. Tell them Andrei is injured and that there's a dangerous conductor here. Tell them I'm in the bathroom. She spoke quickly, in one breath, trying not to show her panic. I knew this call wouldn't save us instantly, but it would start the main schedule. The conductor kicked the latch. The door swung open. She burst in, holding the key in front of her like a weapon. I raised the bottle of Adicolonum. You think you can stop me by wrapping me in a corset and stockings? She swung the key. I didn't defend myself. Instead, I stepped forward and threw the bottle at her face with all my might. The glass shattered. A sharp scream rang out, mixed with the smell of men's adicolonum. She staggered, covering her face with her hands. I rushed out of the bathroom, jumping over Andrei's body. His body was warm, alive. I grabbed my bag from the floor and ran into the kitchen. The fire escape. The iron steps were cold from the rain. I went down, feeling my wet eyes stick to my body, how my feet hurt from touching the cold metal. I ran through the streets of Minsk blindly, barefoot in the half-naked slip. Reaching the avenue, I hailed a taxi. Home, quickly and silently, I croaked, shaking from the cold and shock. I arrived home, took a shower, threw away the satin, the ballet flats, and the torn corset. An hour later, the phone rang. Dasha. Her voice was hysterical, yet collected. Mom, what was that? Do you know what happened? Andrei, they found him. He was attacked. The police are already there. He's alive, but he's in really bad shape. Honey, I don't know. I arrived, saw the apartment open, went in, and there was this woman, the conductor. I called for help and ran away. I was scared. Dasha. The lie was bitter but necessary. Conductor? What conductor? Dasha's voice sounded confused. I don't know. An elderly woman. She was shouting something about the schedule and how Andrei owed her something. Oh my God, Mom, I need to go to the hospital. Can you come stay with us and stay with Sasha? Of course, Dasha. I'm on my way. I hung up. I felt devastated, but at the same time incredibly alive. I returned to Dasha's apartment. I sat with my grandson all night, playing the role of a caring grandmother, while Dasha was in the hospital with Andrei. In the morning, while Dasha was sleeping, I quietly took his work phone. The password was simple, their shared wedding date. I found a number on VContact that I'd never noticed before. It was listed as a depot. The main thing was, I opened the conversation, the last message from the depot. The main thing was sent yesterday afternoon. I know about the cherry varnish. I know you're transporting it on my line. Today at 7, I'm waiting. You have to decide for yourself. I already left my key. I understand. The conductor is not just a jealous lover. It was the official central element of his other secret life, connected to his work, to his movements, and the key was left by her as an invitation to a deadly game. I deleted the message, blocked the number, and put the phone back. Andrei survived, but he was in a coma. The doctors were giving no prognosis. Dasha was crying. I looked at her innocent, beautiful face, and I knew this story wasn't over. The conductor had been arrested, but her madness remained, and most importantly, Andrei's last words on the commuter train echoed in my head. I would have ridden with you all night. I knew that when he woke up, he wouldn't be the same, and I wouldn't be the same. I was Alla Viktorovna, grandma, but now I was Alla, the woman who knew the scent of blood on a brass key and the way it slid across smooth skin. I went to the window. Snow was falling over Minsk, the first clean snow, and when he wakes up, he will forget a lot. But will he forget how my skin burned under his hand when I was bound in a corset? That will be his first riddle and my last hope.